And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. I say this every program because it's true. We have a very special guest on our program. She's a returning guest. Where are all the preliminaries that I usually announce? I'll give them later. I'll give them throughout the program, so stay with us. SueFrederick is back with us again today. She is joining us to continue our conversation. She's the author of Through a Divine Lens. I have to tell you, Sue, first of all, thank you for coming back and joining us again.
It's an honor to be back talking to you again.
I've been listening to a book that I was given by a dear friend, a departed friend of mine, who I knew for 40 years, called The Impersonal Life. It was channeled through a gentleman by the name of James Benner. I can't remember if it's an E or an A. Needless to say, I'm listening to this, and it's basically a one-sided conversation that he channeled from the divine, from God, if you will. And I remember in talking with my friend who gave me this book, and we were sharing different things over the years, and she said that if she were stranded on a desert island and could only have one book, that would be the book. And I can kind of understand that because I'm gleaning new things because of many of the experiences that I've had since she gave me that when I was 21. So I've had it for, what would that be, 42 years? And it talks about not only our connection, our unified oneness, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not, we are all connected.
Right.
And we affect one another, but that we should have no fear of death and dying. And that's sort of the subject today, but a little twist. It's something new that has come on the scene. Now, it may be new only to the general public, in terms of a term. But we're going to talk today, something that you want to share with us today about shared death experience. Now, I have not been in the presence of an individual, a human, who has passed. I have with animals, but not humans. Matter of fact, as of this program, I don't know if it was before March 1st of this year, my father, he departed. But then I lost my best friend of 53 years. We went through grade school, high school, and college together. And of course, I found out 2 months after the fact. But I still remember this, that I remember coming down the hill. I've shared this before too. And I wanted to cry. I really want to cry. So every time I thought about him, I started laughing because he and I had so much fun together. First of all, let's define what a shared death experience is, because the one who is sharing this experience with the one who is on the way out, so to speak, or transitioning. Bernie Siegel doesn't like transitioning. He prefers to say died. That's what they did. They died. Okay. And due respect.
Only their physical self died.
Right.
Only the body.
And due respect to Bernie. I love the man dearly. He's been on the program many times. What is a shared death experience?
Well, Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience when he was describing people who clinically died and left their body and had an experience and then came back and had a different point of view of life from then on. That's the near-death experience. And then he also, Raymond Moody, coined the term shared death experience and did a lot of research about people who were with a person who at their moment of death and were taken into an alternative reality, a higher consciousness by their departed loved one. And he calls that a shared death experience because it also has a transformational effect on the loved one. But here's what's interesting, Richard, is that according to Raymond Moody and according to my own experience that I'll share today, you don't even have to be there in the presence of your loved one when they cross for you to have a shared death experience. And two of my shared death experiences were I was not with the person.
And for someone who, and I, when someone passes, my first thoughts, even with my sister, my father, and my best friend, it wasn't so much sadness. Oh, I wish he were still here, she, etc. It's, I wonder what they're experiencing.
Yes.
and and there is a way to find out what they have experienced, because there's also another Dr. Newton who did near Life
Right.
Between Lives. There are all kinds of
Right.
books, even on Amazon,
Yeah.
Audible. I've
Yeah.
read two or three of the case studies, two or three
Well,
of the books
I
on case
was
studies. Fascinating.
trained, I was trained in that work to do those kinds of sessions with clients and take them to the between lives, divine realms. And I take clients there every day and they have the most amazing experiences. So I love Newton's work. And I was trained by one of his students, Dr. Linda Bachman. And these journeys with people out of the ordinary realms back to the divine realms to have conversations and then to drop into a significant past lifetime. It's incredible what people experience.
Oh yeah. I still remember mine is still fairly vivid in my memory. And the thing that I liked about it, we have a practitioner here. He's been on this program. His name is Peter Wright. He's been on this program many times as well, talking about the work that he does and all of the different modalities that he utilizes to assist and support people in maybe breaking free from some of the things that hold them back. With a shared death experience, how do you begin that process? Let's just say I'm going to take my father, for example. On a Saturday, he was really having troubles. He was hallucinating to the point where he thought my mother, trying to hydrate him, was trying to poison him, and so forth. And then they took him into the hospital. They did some tests. They found out that he had Parkinson's as well as dementia. They were able to give him some medication so that at times he was very lucid. I had a great opportunity to talk with him the night before his passing. But let's say you have someone, a relative like my father. How does this process of sharing this experience begin?
Well, let me tell you, my father's experience of crossing over and taking me and giving me an experience, because that'll answer the question.
Okay.
So, this was actually my third shared death experience. So, my first one was my husband, Paul, in 1980. And then my best girlfriend, Chrissy, in 1982, I think. And then my father. And in my father's moment, he was in the hospital dying from lung cancer. And he was my person growing up. He was the one person in my family I felt very deeply connected to and loved by. But when my first husband, Paul, had died, I had said to my dad, "You can't ever die. You have to stay with me. I really need you." And it was amazing because before he was even diagnosed with cancer, I knew he was crossing. He was calling me and talking about certain things. And there's a sense you get when you've been at the side of people who've crossed, you know, when their soul is beginning to choose that soul exit point. So we had these extraordinary conversations about the purpose of his life and his memories and all kinds of stuff. And then I flew home before my family said that I should, because they said, "Oh, he's not dying. You know, he's got a back problem or something." Like they just didn't want to face it. And by the time he was diagnosed, they gave him 2 weeks to live, and he had lung cancer that had been a hidden tumor behind his heart, which I thought was quite a powerful metaphor. And so we were all taking turns caring for him at the hospital, and he was in and out of a coma. And on this one particular day, I knew that he was going to be crossing that day. And I said to my family, I want to be here because I know I can help him cross. And my family is my greatest challenge and my greatest gift. And my mother said, no, it's your sister Beth's turn to be here. So you have to go home and babysit all the grandchildren. All of us siblings had young toddler kids at that point, and so somebody had to always be taking care of them. And my mom said, no, you need to go. So I said goodbye to my dad, kissed his head, and told him how much I loved him and that it would be okay with me if he crossed, that we would all be okay. I went, got all the kids, in the van, and took them home and got them down for a nap. And I instantly sat down to meditate, because I'd been meditating for decades, since the 70s. And that's the key right there, is to be quiet and receptive. So I sat down to meditate, but I wasn't doing it thinking, oh, Dad's going to cross and come visit me. I was just doing it because I was actually upset that my mother had sent me home with the kids. So I was like having my mom moment of like, gosh, like she doesn't respect me or know who I am in any way, or she would want me there.
Yeah.
And so I sat down to meditate, and instantly my father appeared in front of me, so young and healthy and happy and silly. It was like 20 years earlier, the way he had been. And he was making me laugh. And when Dad was on his game, he was the funniest, silliest guy. And we used to say, Dad, we have to send you to clown school. You're just a clown. And he would be so funny. And so in this, he appears to me completely happy and like making me laugh and joking around with me. And I'm in my meditation going, oh, Dad, you're a goofball. And then all of a sudden I'm like, Dad, you're here. And I opened my eyes and went, oh my God, Dad was just with me and he was happy and free. And I picked up the phone and called the hospital. And I said, Dad just appeared to me. And my brother Jim said, he just had a heart attack and they're trying to give him CPR and it's chaos in the room. And I said, he's not in that body. He's already free. He's already come to show me that he's happy and free of the body. And a few minutes later, they gave up on the CPR, and the rest of my family was gathered around my father's body. And I knew he was completely free of that body. I felt no need to have to go do that because he had already shown me that he was free and happy and healthy and having a great time outside of that old body that he had been struggling with.
I felt the same way when I got the phone call to tell me that he had passed. And I hadn't talked to anybody all that day. And of course, it was around 10:30 or 11 o'clock that night when I got the call. And I had almost the same reaction as my sister the year before when she passed. That I wasn't sad in the way that you usually are, because my first thought was, okay, well, just a moment ago, so to speak, she was in Scottsdale, Arizona, in that body that has been racked by all kinds of stuff over the entire 65 years of her life. My father, after her passing, he lost all interest in being here. I remember too, my mother telling me about his medical condition, which was perfectly healthy at the time of this conversation that the two of them had. And he says, I just don't want to be here anymore. I'm tired. I just don't want to be here. And he was very healthy at the time, again, of this particular conversation, a year prior to his passing. And so my mother, knowing this, him saying, I just don't want to be here, she says, okay, so what are you going to die of? Because he didn't have anything that he was dealing with that was terminal, other than being a human being. I mean, but that's kind of for all of us.
Right.
But I know that my mother has probably had some of these kinds of experiences. She was a nurse. She was a registered nurse for many years, even while we were kids growing up. And actually she did, I think she did home care, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And it was just really, and I haven't had a chance nor the inclination at this point, because I want to ask the questions, but I don't want to get into, an area where she maybe isn't ready. I don't know if she is or not. And I'm sure maybe if I ask her, she'll say, I'm not ready. And I'll say, okay, I appreciate that. And I will,
well, Raymond Moody did research a lot of nurses and hospice workers and found that, yes, many of them who were caring for people who were not in their family, but were their patients, many of them had shared death experiences when that person they were caring for crossed over. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. And is it okay if I tell you about
please
my best girlfriend Chrissy's crossing, which was phenomenal, because I know you've lost a best friend as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, before you tell us that story, let me tell our listeners that we're talking with SueFrederick, and SueFrederick.com is the website where you can find out more about the work that she's doing. She has this wonderful book. It's called Through a Divine Lens. And I think that unfortunately, Sammy's camera does not carry this particular lens. We'll find out how to maybe access that. And we'll find out more about her friend and the experience that she had as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is really a pleasure to have SueFrederick with us here on the program. And you were going to share with us your experience of your best friend departing this mortal coil, as they say.
Well, I think my best friend's story is similar to yours, because I had actually met her in first grade, gone all the way through grade school and high school with her. And then she was so brilliant that she was one of the first women accepted into Georgetown University in 1969. And she used to always make me laugh so hard, harder than any friend I've ever had before or after. And we grew up in Catholic school. And we were those girls who would be sitting in mass, and Chrissy would be next to me and the nuns would be lined up behind us. And Chrissy would say something or do something that would have me just fall apart in giggles. But we were trying not to move. And like we would just be sitting there and shaking. I would be laughing so hard. I'd be shaking and crying. And, every now and then a squeak would come out. Like I'd go, oh, we had so much fun, me and Chrissy. And then she went off to Georgetown. I went to University of Missouri, and because I was not nearly as brilliant as her, And then we just always kept in touch. And in fact, right after my husband died of colon cancer in 1980, she had been living in Berkeley, California. She was getting a PhD, and she came to visit me, and we had a phenomenal weekend talking about life and death. And she fell on our ski trip, and her leg got a terrible bruise. And we were both looking at that bruise going, wow, it looks like you broke something, And she's like, no, I can walk on it. And so I got her, by the time the weekend was over, took her to the airport. She flew back to California. And by the time she got off the plane, her body was covered in bruises, and she was rushed to the ER and diagnosed with really aggressive leukemia. So this was just a few months after Paul had died, and Chrissy had been my lifelong friend, my friend who helped me process everything that went on in life. So it was a very hard moment for me, existential crisis, talk about being angry at the world and trying to understand why good people suffer and all of those questions that took me on a great spiritual journey. But Chrissy then went through a bone marrow transplant, went into remission, and we would meet up again, and she seemed to be doing okay. And then one night, about a year later, I was asleep in Colorado where I lived, and she was in California, and I thought she was in remission. And the whole night, Chrissy came to me in my dreams and was making me laugh so hard that I was waking up with my stomach muscles hurting the way they only would hurt when I would be laughing with Chrissy, where you just can't, you're just like going, Chrissy, stop making me laugh. My stomach muscles are killing me. Please stop. It went on like that all night. And she was flying me around, showing me friends that we knew. And she was happy and joyful, and she looked beautiful. She had her hair back and everything. And most importantly, she was hysterically funny and making me laugh like crazy. And I would wake up during the night going, oh, I'm dreaming of Chrissy. This is so great. And I'd go back to sleep and it would still continue. And by the time I woke up in the morning, my stomach muscles were still hurting. And I was going, wow, I was with Chrissy all night. And then I was like, oh no, I was with Chrissy all night. And so I called her mom, and her mom said that last night, she had gone into a coma yesterday, and last night she had crossed. And she had come to me right away to show me that the minute the soul is free of the body, and often that's before the medical world announces the death, that the soul is happy and loving and laughing and free. And she took me around the world to visit our friends and make me laugh. And to me, that was the greatest spiritual message from Chrissy, that all is well and that there is no death.
Mm. And that's one of the things that I know that we want to kind of get across to people, is that there is no death, that it is a transition period, if you will. And that to me is extremely important for people to grasp. It's like I said earlier, well, they once, my dad was just in a physical body, and he was just in Phoenix. Yeah. And I would have to call him and, see what's going on and so forth. And then I realized, oh my gosh, he's everywhere now.
Right.
He's everywhere now. Cool.
It's just a different relationship.
Exactly. Exactly.
And for me, with my father and with Chrissy and with my husband, Paul, I call on them all the time and have conversations with them. And here's what hung me up at first. And I have to tell you, I've been on a long spiritual seeking journey to answer all these questions because they haunted me. And I'm a good Virgo. I need to understand the purpose of things and analyze life. And when Paul died, I lived in Boulder, Colorado. Boulder, Colorado is an amazingly Buddhist town. It's got a huge Buddhist population. So I even studied with the Buddhists for a while in Boulder. I think they've really mastered the art of meditation and quieting the mind. But they would tell me, don't try to communicate with Paul. He's got to move on. And that really messed me up for a while. And when he would come to visit, I wouldn't really embrace it. I think, well, you've got to move on. But then I started studying other things and metaphysical journeys and all kinds of stuff and near-death experiencers and quantum physics. I learned so much from quantum physics that the time continuum is not linear the way our mind thinks it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so time and space is actually happening all at once. So once you have a soul agreement with someone, as we do with anyone we love, then when they cross, they can, of course, be moving on and reincarnating, whatever they choose to do. And then the moment you call out to them from your heart, they come through the time and space continuum, and they're with you to help you heal and help you move forward in your life. That is still one of their jobs, and they will always come to us. And that's hard to get our minds around because we want to think in a linear way. But the time and space continuum is not linear.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's one of those things that we have to, again, we've got to come to a place of, well, I want to say acceptance.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, and I honestly, this is why I'm so grateful that my father was unconscious. And I'd like to believe, based upon my conversation with him at the end, he was not afraid.
Right.
And he wasn't afraid because the bottom line was he was done. He had done everything that he had wanted to do. He had some issues that he and I talked about on a number of occasions where it was one of those things where the process that he was going through, he had to go through because he wanted to go.
Yeah.
So there was no fear. There was just, I want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
also,
I find that interesting.
Richard, what I've learned also in my studies and I work with grieving people every day, so I hear all of their stories about their departed loved one crossing. And what I've learned is that the soul is always in charge, and the soul picks. We have several potential exit points, and the soul will pick the one that comes along when they really have accomplished what they came to accomplish in their lifetime. And that could be a 3-year-old child, because that child could be a highly advanced soul who came in briefly for a process of awakening for the family and loved ones, and accomplished so much love and compassion in their brief life that it was their agreement with their loved ones before the lifetime began that they would leave early, and by doing this, help everyone in their family grow and expand and evolve spiritually. A very hard journey, of course, but that is the purpose of it. And so the soul will sometimes pick a path of physical suffering. And what I've heard from my guides and my teachers is that highly evolved souls who have had a negative pattern that they've kept repeating in lifetimes, maybe it's anger, maybe it's fear, maybe it's self-doubt, they may choose cancer or dementia or cerebral palsy or some very terrifying looking physical illness, because in their soul, they are burning away their negativity and totally embracing all unconditional love and compassion. And by the time they cross, that's where they are. And it's like an accelerated soul growth moment.
Well, I am fascinated by all of this. I have been for many years. And I just, I mean, I don't think about it constantly, but when somebody passes, yeah, it's kind of hard not to,
Yeah.
it really is. It's very challenging in that respect. And so I just try to keep a, so to speak, a grip on who I am and what I'm all about. And and again, just stay focused on the aspects of what is real. And that is something else that I think is a challenge for us, is it not? In that we have a difficult time with what is real and what isn't real. My present wife, for example, right now, and this is the term we're using, okay? Last night she bolted up. We were watching TV, and she looked over to the right, which was over by the fireplace where we have. I just saw a ghost.
Well, it's not a ghost. It's the spirit, maybe of your dad or her beloveds, or whatever. We just got to stop using these words like ghost and death. But, when we look at it from the lens of the soul, because there's two ways we look at life, and one is what I call the ego lens, where it's all about if I can see it and touch it, it's real. And the quantum physicists have so much research to show that that is not true, that this reality is all energy that is formed for us and by us, and that we are eternal spirit, soul, energy. So when we shift our understanding of what is real, the physical world is the least real thing that we're experiencing. And yet our linear logical minds can't understand that or embrace that. And the culture, I think the problem with the collective consciousness right now, and the gift of this moment, is that our culture has gotten so bogged down in the left brain reality of logic and linear thinking. And if I can see it and touch it and feel it, it's real. And yet the higher truth is that we are all divine beings who came here on purpose. We're beings of light, spirits, that we come into earth briefly to learn and evolve and help others evolve. And that pain is part of the earthly journey, because often it's the only thing that gets us to wake up and learn and grow. And once we shift into that point of view, we open our hearts. We realize this world is not about ideas and thinking and opinions. It's about compassion and love, unconditional love for others, and seeing it through the soul lens of compassion. That's the world we're in at this huge tipping point right now. And that's why shows like yours are so important, to help these very logical, linear, cynical people realize, oh, maybe it's not about ideas. Maybe it's about opening the heart.
Yeah. And what is so fascinating to me when I think about that concept or principle, if you will, of what is really real and what is not real. And I have to really put a laugh track on the events that are unfolding in the world today.
Yeah.
As horrific as they are, okay?
Right.
Pardon me. As horrific as they are, or as crazy as they are. And one of the things that I was listening to in the impersonal life, and I know this is going to rub some people way the wrong way. This is my observation based upon what I'm reading. And I've said this on this program before. There are three elements within our preamble to the Constitution, where we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. None of those are just three of. And we have a First Amendment right of, free expression, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, all of this is indemnifying, shall we say, individuality. But in the impersonal life, it's irrelevant. There is no individuality.
Right. We're all collectively connected.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I realize that rubs some people the wrong way. What do you mean there's no, that's because you're coming from the intellect.
Right.
You're coming from you're trying to logically understand it. And the reality is, even in the Bible, it says that we are all members of the body, if you will. Okay. We are all members of. Ergo, and this one really took me for a loop when I very first read this book for the very first time, where it said that It's like we come from the one and we will return to the one.
Yeah.
And that our thoughts, which are part of our intellect, are not our own. I realize that this rubs against the whole free will business. But when you start to think about it from this standpoint, and this even is true as we are approaching our time of transition, the choices, and we talk about this all the time, choices and knowledge of the choices to help make your dreams come true. Guess what? The choices aren't even yours. You think they're yours. You think your thoughts are your own, but they're not. And the difference between being a slave to, quote unquote, a master and choosing to serve is that you, and again, this is still in the intellectual part, you think you're choosing to serve when in fact you're being guided. And I myself, it's like this paradox is rolling in my head. I think my head is going to explode.
Well, I have a different way of
Please.
seeing that I'd like to share. That the one is the loving God consciousness force that runs this universe, and it's an all good, all God universe. As you know, I'm a ordained unity minister, and that's the principle that we are basing our beliefs on, that this is an all good, all God universe run by a consciousness of God that is unconditionally love. And we are part of it. We have that God consciousness inside of us. It's in our hearts, not in our heads. And when we agree to come to Earth, we're coming for the good of the collective, not just for our little ego to make $1 million and drive a sports car. We're coming in to push each other to grow and awaken to the fact that we are all part of God. And we'll know that we've awakened to it when kindness is the action that's honored on earth, when compassion for all, no matter the color of skin or where they're from or what they do for a living or don't do for a living or what addictions they have, when we're able to see all of that with the compassion of unconditional love and kindness, we will have fully awakened to our God consciousness while we're here on earth. Now I don't want to talk about religion because most religion has gone way far from that. But spiritual knowingness says it's not the ideas that I think that are important. It's the love that I give to the world that is essential.
I had a gentleman on this program who his name is Lion, believe it or not, Lion Goldman. And we talked about this whole aspect of the aspect of perspective, or I should say perception. Or shall we say, we were talking about truth and facts, okay? And we both came to the same conclusion that continues to reinforce this aspect that this is not the important place, okay? This material world,
right?
I mean, throw a laugh track on it; it doesn't make any difference,
right?
Because it's temporal. It's all temporal. And we came to this conclusion that if you say that the sky is green, who am I to argue? That's your perception.
Right.
It may not be mine, but it's yours.
It's where you are in your level of awakening. And that's what we've done so wrong in this world, and especially in the last, I'd say, 5 years or so, is that my perception, if I'm arguing that you need to see it my way, I'm coming from the ego. I'm coming from the monkey mind, from the separateness of myself. When I accept your views, even if I completely disagree with them, And I love on you anyway, because I know that's exactly what you've learned so far in this journey. And you're doing the best you can on your own journey of growth and evolution. And you've got a pain story like everybody else here. And you're trying to learn to love. And this is where you are right now. Once I can see it that way, all I have to do is feel compassion and kindness for you and not continue the debate, because the debate, we have learned this in the last few years, all the debate does is seed hatred and division. And this is a time of us waking up and going, whoa, debating ideas doesn't serve us anymore.
Yeah. It was really kind of interesting when I was listening to this one program. Actually, it was one of these short videos on YouTube. And I love going through those because there are some very funny things on there and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one that said that, for example, and this goes to your point of in terms of the whole aspect of kindness and so forth and so on, irrespective of. They said that Barack Obama was not our first president. Well, it was not our first black president. Let me put it that way. He was
Mm-hmm.
not. George Washington came from Britain.
Mm-hmm.
But every other president has been, I take that back. There were what was it, 8 to 12, something, 8 or 10 presidents in the early years of this country, in the first maybe 75 to 100 years of this country, that had African American blood coursing through their veins.
Right. And I think most of us do, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Probably so. And I thought,
know I do.
Wow, that changes things.
Yeah. I know, that's the thing. Our mind wants to create separateness. And it is such a joke that the divine beings watching us, they're like, oh my God, they're so unaware.
Yeah.
And if everybody on earth, even the big haters, had to do these deep DNA tests, ancestor blood tests, they would see, oh, wow, my great, great, great somebody bonded with a slave, and that's how I'm here. I mean, it's amazing to see that we all have every culture in our blood, in our DNA, because we are all in this collective together. And we're trying to learn that lesson that, Martin Luther King Jr. was telling us in the 60s that we still haven't grasped, that it's not the color of our skin that matters, but what's in our hearts. That's the most powerful spiritual truth ever spoken, in my opinion.
I could not agree with you more. It's a sad thing. But then the other aspect of it too is, you say that if we can get beyond all of that, then we will have a period, we'll have, this time of kindness and courtesy and so forth. When in fact, if we were just that way, we wouldn't even be using those words.
That's right.
We wouldn't even need to.
That's right.
And I think of Jesus, for example, and his miracles. We call them miracles. Right. Okay. Not to him. They weren't miracles to him. That was just the way he was. That was just what he did.
Yeah.
And I love what he says to his disciples. I can't remember exactly where it is, whether it was a Sermon on the Mount or someplace else, where they were in awe of his miracles. Wow. Could you teach us to do that? Really? Sure. I'll be more than happy to, but I need to tell you something. You think this is great? You guys are going to do greater works than these. And I personally believe that the greater work is transforming our lives and raising our consciousness through this concept of the shared death experience. Is that an experience that can help us to do just that?
Well, once we stop being afraid of death, that is a huge starting point for awakening here on earth. Once we realize that the soul is eternal And then we start realizing, wow, there's no punishing God. There's no hell the way religion teaches. Spirits are free when they leave the body. And we each evaluate our own lifetime. We're held by the angels and the guides, and we look at our own lifetime and we realize what a short blip it was in our soul's journey. And we go, wow, why didn't I be kinder? Why wasn't I more loving? Why wasn't I more compassionate and courageous? All those qualities that people are talked out of in their physical life. They're talked into being mean and hateful and driven by their logic mind and not courageous. So when we cross over and we see that, we also see the ripple effects of all of our actions, thoughts, and words on everyone we've ever been with. And that ripple effect affects everyone, and everyone who does a soul review and comes back says they learned that even a negative thoughts towards someone, that person is affected by it energetically, and that negativity can affect others. Whereas if we send love to someone, they are affected. They're feeling loving in that moment. They don't even know why, but they're feeling uplifted, and that energy affects the people around them. We are such powerful, energetic beings. It's the miracles you're talking about in the Bible. We can send love out and help this world shift into its higher expression. I also believe, Richard, that what we're trying to do collectively here is create heaven on earth. The veil is thinning. And when the veil thins more and more as people wake up, we will be in this lovely, amazing earth. We'll be transforming it into the paradise it's meant to be. And we will be totally aware that we are divine beings and there's no death. And we'll have our loved ones communicating and with us all the time.
Would that not be a wonderful thing? I'll tell you.
Right.
And the thing that is disturbing to me about the I'll call it the resistance that we seem to experience from people who just don't seem to want to do that. They just don't seem to want to do that.
It's just fear.
Yeah.
Richard.
Is that many other people buy into it. I refer to the 2016 presidential campaign as the presidential campaign of victimhood.
Yes.
Now,
it continues.
It does. But I have to tell you, I went through my phase of victimhood. Thank God it was short. It was very short. Back in the early 80s, I went through a program called LifeSpring, which was an
yes, I know all about that. Yeah.
And I learned that you are where you are in the circumstances you find yourself in because you want to be there in the circumstances you are in.
Right.
And someone, I can hear someone already say, oh, you have to be kidding me. They hit me with their car, or they did this, or they did that. It's like, sorry. But for example, and I use this all the time, when I get onto the highway, the freeway, any street, any road with my vehicle, and there's a car in front of me, and there's a car behind me, I chose to be behind the car that's in front of me, just as the person behind me chose to be behind me. And so I drive offensively. I mean, I'm looking around, and I love my mother dearly. She'll be 89 in September. And it's not her responsibility to look out for me. Okay. I love her dearly. She's had a few car incidents that were not her fault and so forth, but I don't expect her to do the right thing, not because I don't think she will, but because it's not her responsibility. That word, doesn't that actually can drive fear into people, can't it?
Well, you know what, right now, all of the victimhood thinking that we've carried in our human consciousness is being brought out of the darkness so that it can be revealed and healed. And we know there are political figures who are carrying that victimhood story out to the world. And, you know, no matter what happens, they are the victim, even if they're, I'm not going to talk about that anymore, but all right. So,
Yeah.
but the whole idea of personal responsibility is, we are really on the cusp of waking up to that, because the victim story is getting a whole lot of coverage right now, and people are finally getting disgusted with it and finally going, you know, there's just a point where you have to take responsibility for your life, your actions, and what's happening to you. And if you're 90 when that happens, so be it. But hopefully we're going to wake up sooner than later. And I know a lot of these 20-something kids here are so evolved and so awakened and so enlightened, and they want nothing to do with the world the way it's being played today. And they're going to create a way better world for us. And they are not looking at it as victims. And they're extraordinary, and they're going to save this world.
Yeah. Well, you know, there was an interesting piece I saw specifically regarding Washington, D.C., but it's happening across the country in reference. And this is a very small, minute thing that kind of goes to show what you're talking about. And again, it seems innocuous, it seems irrelevant, but if you kind of take a look at it, it kind of speaks to what you just said. Did you know that loafers and laces and so forth are going by the wayside in the halls of Congress in lieu of sneakers?
What?
Yes, they are not wearing the black or brown dress shoes. Now, some of the older guys are still, and gals are, well, guys are still, but the younger representatives and senators, they're walking around the halls of Congress in the halls of the Capitol in sneakers.
I love it.
All kinds, because they want to be comfortable.
Right.
And it's like, well, if it has to start with
right
with dress,
what you wear on your feet, yeah,
so
that's
be
a
it.
good beginning.
So be it. I just thought that was such a fascinating.
Well, I hope the women are doing it too, because you know, women have been tortured by their shoes.
I've never understood that. I've never understood. It's like, okay, you say your feet hurt when you wear those shoes, those high heel shoes. Why are you wearing them?
Well, you know, I guess I was ahead of the times, because back in the 80s, when I was a VP of content for health magazines, and I would have to go to these big conventions where we would have to cover miles of territory, and I would always wear my beautiful dress and sneakers. And I started kind of a trend then. All these women that I worked with, we'd all be wearing our beautiful outfits with sneakers. And at night, if we were going to go to a fancy party, we could change our shoes at the door and put on some heels or something. But we were going to say that I am not going to force my feet into pain and misery to appease the idea of how women should look in the world. And I just loved that. I have many pictures of me running around with big, beautiful dresses and sneakers on from the 80s and the 90s. And nowadays I have these shoes that are kind of like Oxfords, but they're different colors and they're beautiful and they lace up, and I wear them with everything because they are pure comfort. And you reach my age and you're like, why on earth would a woman torture herself like that? Because it's such a male paradigm of who women should be.
Yeah, and it has struck me many times. I just sit there and I go, wait, I don't understand this. You want equal rights, you want equal pay, you want all of this stuff, and yet you continue to buy into the, I guess it's socially acceptable these days, the look that you think that the rest of the world wants. My wife wears little or no makeup at all. Doesn't bother me in the least. She's a beautiful woman. She doesn't need it. I don't think any woman needs it, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. Okay.
It's our
Hey,
programming,
I could be wrong,
It starts at a very young age with women, a very young age, and it's handed down through mothers and grandmothers and and definitely growing up in the 50s, I was told by my mom and grandmother that I was ugly and that the only way that I'd ever find love is if I really dressed myself up and put on lots of makeup. And when a little girl hears that the only way they're going to be loved is if they try to look this certain kind of way, that
Mhm.
becomes a very powerful brainwashing imprint that women get at a very young age.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. And men are getting dragged into that too.
Yeah, they are.
I mean,
Yep.
I personally, the only reason, this is a weird one, but the only reason why I have a beard is because 10 years ago I injured my elbow, my right elbow, and I couldn't reach my face with the
Oh,
razor. So
wow.
I let it grow and I started seeing that, oh, hmm, if I trim this up, this will look real good. Of course, I had to wait a while and I started looking like a real vicious mountain man. But 21 years ago, 22 years ago, I shaved my head in
Mm,
solidarity with my wife who was going through chemo. She's
wow.
been free and clear of it ever since.
Wow.
And so I continue to do that. That has nothing to do with fashion.
Right.
And why do I wear jeans and I actually this hat and so forth? Because I like it, not because I'm trying
Yeah.
to make a fashion statement, but
Yeah.
because I like the way it looks.
You feel
I can't
comfortable.
I can't say it
You feel
any.
comfortable and
Yeah,
authentic. And
exactly.
that's what we have to go for is feeling comfortable and authentic. And you would think that that would be our natural tendency in what we wear, but it's not. We're so far from that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly. And I sit there going, yeah, you'd think, but not so much.
Right.
Well, I have some additional things that I want to go into here in just a moment. But first, what I want to do is I want to let you folks know that you are listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. These are some of the preliminaries that I mentioned earlier. We are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. And we podcast at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. We're also on YouTube. You can watch these interviews. And I hope that you will. And I hope you'll click notifications so that the next time I put up a conversation such as this, you'll know that there's another one up there that you can listen to, and I hope that you will. We are here with SueFrederick, and this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I have, as usual, Sue, those three questions that I usually ask our guests at the end of the program? Well, I'm
Mhm.
going to ask those again of you. Even if a guest has been on a number of times, sometimes the answers change. But before I get to those, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this shared death experience. Um, One of the things that's been said over and over again by some of our guests about the life that we are living, and you kind of make this a point in a conversation here, but also in your book and on your website, that the purpose of all of this is to help us to live a life of purpose, to help to find our life's purpose, to help to get in touch with that still small voice that will guide us to continue to raise our awareness and our consciousness. Is it and I'm just wondering. I'm not sure exactly. Obviously, I didn't start experiencing. Well, actually, I did. I actually started experiencing the passing of people back when my grandmother passed away in our home. It was a Thanksgiving weekend, and I must have been, I don't know, maybe 9, 10, maybe 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that that was a beautiful experience to have her pass away in our home. She was visiting us for Thanksgiving. The night before, she got to watch her favorite movie, which she took us to the drive-in theater in Florence, Arizona to see when we were younger, called The Sound of Music.
Oh, yes.
She got to watch that on TV that night before, went to bed. My eldest sister, who has since passed, said that she remembers waking up and seeing Grandma get up and go to the bathroom and then come back and lie down. And somewhere in the night, she passed.
Mm-hmm. What a beautiful exit.
But we don't get to experience those unless we have those experiences, so to speak, placed before us, or that we've chosen to have in our lives. Like I said, I wasn't there with my father or my eldest sister or my best friend, or any of the other people in the last year and a half to 2 years who have passed. But as you said earlier, that isn't necessary.
Right. The soul chooses the moment of exit. And what I've learned is that if a soul crosses while they're alone, that's intentional too. And often it's because they need to be away from the people they love, who love them, because there's so much attachment there that it makes them hard. It's hard for them, for the soul to leave the body. I've especially found this to be true. For example, when a husband is caring for a dying wife, and the husband will leave the room for 10 minutes and come back, and his wife has crossed, and he'll beat himself up and say, I shouldn't have left the room. But the opposite is true. Your wife was having a hard time letting go of that attachment between you. And when you finally walked away, she was able to lift out of the body and ascend. And that's a beautiful thing. Somehow, the way the death plays out is always on purpose and in divine order.
How about that broken heart syndrome? I found out that my former wife's father passed away of an aneurysm. And 4 months later, my former wife's mother passed away. And that's how they described it, broken heart syndrome.
Well, I would look at it differently. I would say powerful soul agreement. They came in to fulfill something together, a purpose together. And when they both hit the moment of having achieved it, their exit points were there and they left. They had no reason to stay without their soul agreement with their beloved.
I don't know how many years, months, or days my mother has. She's healthy. She is, she is no different than she was when she was in her 40s or 50s, I can tell you. All right. Wow. That is how well she is doing. I know that she is missing my father dearly, but at the same time, I also know that she is relieved that he has gone on.
Yeah.
Because if she had gone first, he would have followed right after.
Yeah.
Because he was very attached. As a matter of fact, one of my sisters at his memorial said that these are her words, he doted on our mother. Mm-hmm. And there's a beautiful picture. I've got to get a copy of it from my mother. There's a beautiful picture of him standing behind the couch, looking over her shoulder with the biggest grin on his face as she is opening a gift. I can't remember if it was Valentine's Day, her birthday, Christmas. And, you can just see it in his eyes and on his face, how much he loved her. And so, yeah, I think that's very interesting. You complete your tasks, you finish your mission, so to speak. Okay. And some would say, some have even said, though, that it isn't, it's not that, it's that, I understand now. And then they go, because it's not their job to tell the rest of the world what they understood. It's kind of like that aha moment that takes you out.
A God moment. Well, I would argue with that and say many people experience those God moments while they're here in the body, and it still keeps them here because then they want to do more and do better in their life. And I often ask my students and clients to share a God moment memory where they suddenly saw the oneness of everything and how we're all part of God and everything is love. Everybody's had these moments. Everybody's had it, and they might back down and go, oh, that was coincidence, or I was tired, or I was hungry, or whatever. They'll try to logic their way out of it.
Yep.
But it was a moment of seeing who we are and that we are all love. And when we see that, we can say, wow, now I can live better. I can be kinder. I can find purposeful work. And then when I finally cross and leave the body, I'll be able to go, woohoo, I did it. I achieved what I came to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will tell you that I don't believe in coincidence. I actually rephrase it. You know how the British, they take certain words and they'll pronounce them differently?
Yeah.
Laboratory. Or they'll just say, yes, I went to hospital. We say, I went to
Right.
the hospital.
Right.
Coincidence. Coincidences.
Oh, that's so good.
Incidents that cross that.
That's
and
beautiful.
There was a beautiful program. I wish I could remember the title of it. It was years ago. It was with Kiefer Sutherland, I believe it was, Donald Sutherland's son.
Mm-hmm.
And he had his son, not his biological, in the show. He was the father of this son with real curly hair who didn't talk, but he drew, and he drew all kinds of stuff and numbers and this and that and the other thing. Mm-hmm. And they would tell in the first, say, 20, 30 minutes of the show, they would tell 3 or 4 separate and independent stories. And in the last half hour, each of these stories began to come together and cross.
Beautiful.
And I thought, how wonderful if people only...
Because that is the divine order of this life. That's exactly right.
Exactly. I just thought, man, if we could just get, I would love to see that. If I could remember that program, maybe I'll Google Kiefer Sutherland TV shows.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll pop up.
I remember that too. And I don't remember the name of it, but yeah, there's been a few movies like that where they're really showing how we're all on purposely interwoven, even if we end up, meeting by bumping into each other in the street, and suddenly we start connecting and we realize there's a purpose for it.
Yeah.
Once you start believing or beginning to believe that everything that happens here is on purpose for your highest good, if you look at it that way and ask for what the lesson is in it and how to embrace that without resistance, that's when we live in that divine order matrix, and instead of something bad and calling it something bad, we go, oh, now this is, what am I supposed to be learning from this?
Yeah.
And how do I move through this with love and grace? If we could really look at everything that way, we would be totally in that divine order matrix of understanding and wisdom.
Yeah. It is so fascinating. And a thought came into my mind from the Impersonal Life, where it talks about, whatever you ask for, and so on and so forth. And so I was thinking, I would sure like to have, and I started this laundry list. And then I remembered another phrase that was mentioned earlier in that chapter about how what it is that we are all looking for, not only is the connection, the oneness, but we're looking for that divine, shall we call it, divine peace, equanimity, tranquility. That the drama is there, yes, to teach us.
Yeah.
Not only in terms of individual lessons from each of the experiences, but in general for me, what I have learned is I don't like the drama anymore. I don't want it anymore. I want that peace. Now, some would say, well, it's an awful boring existence. No, it's not.
No.
Because the things that I am doing, I am narrating audiobooks, I'm producing audiobooks, I'm doing these programs, the broadcast, podcast, video casts. I'm actually managing I'm not the manager, but I'm running a radio station, which I've done for 44 years. on and on and on. And when I am doing those things, I'm in my element. When I'm working out in the yard, trimming the weeds down, maybe changing the garden up for the wife, and she said, hey, let's move this here and move that there, and let's cut this. I'm loving that. Pruning the apple trees in the winter, cutting firewood, and on. I mean, the list. Those are the times that I have that peace, that tranquility, that equanimity. I still love that Chinese, and you're probably familiar with the Chinese proverb. I think it's a proverb about the farmer, his son, and his neighbor. And this neighbor comes over and says, hey, one day, and says, hey, how's it going? He says, well, my son was working with one of the horses and it got away. Oh, that's bad. And the farmer says, well, who's to say whether that's good or bad?
That's right. Yeah, I've heard.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I won't go any further then. And that's part of where I am starting to come from. Have you reached that place in your life, Sue, where know there is no duality anymore?
Right. But I have to say, because we're humans and we're in the physical world, we're always going to slip into our pain, our sadness. For example, my beautiful current husband was diagnosed with aggressive cancer a few years ago. And I remember distinctly walking in two worlds as we navigated. And one world was the physical world. What's the treatment? Where's the doctor? How do we get him through this and heal him? And the other part, my soul, was, if this is his exit point, help us to see that and know that and travel it with grace and surrender. And I was aware I was experiencing both of those at the same time. And I think on earth, we have to have both of those perspectives, because we still have to do the laundry. We still have to make dinner and, trim the bushes in the yard.
And pay the bills.
Right. And pay the bills. But then we also have to go, help me walk this with the awareness that it's all in divine order, no matter how chaotic or scary it may seem. And I even send that out to the condition of the world and how we're all kind of worried about the next election and what's going to happen. We have to trust that there is a divine order in all of this. And it's the long view, the soul's view, that will help us understand it. And the more fear we bring to it, we're not helping it. But the more compassion and peace and wisdom we bring to it, then we're part of the solution.
Yeah. And that's really where we are at with this program. I remember in school years ago when they, talked about, us, what do you want to do, and don't talk about, you want to change the world. That's too big. It's too big a bite. Take little bites. Well, here I am, 63, and I want to change the world. And I'm going to do it through whatever means are put forth that are of my abilities, through this program, through whatever other things that I do, and just make that happen. And more people are beginning to realize that it is possible. 10 years ago, I read about a young man, I want to say from Holland, who came up with this idea for cleaning up the garbage patches on the planet out in the oceans. 10 years later, they are making a difference, because now they're saying, we're going to clean up the garbage patches, but we've got to go to the source. And it's the rivers that are feeding the oceans the garbage. So we need to get the junk out of the rivers, but so they don't keep feeding the oceans. And and I've not been able to get a hold of him. I've wanted to have him on the program. I think it would be a fascinating interview, especially considering that from what I recall, he started out as a teenager. I think he's in his early 20s now.
Yeah.
And it's just remarkable. These are the kinds of people and the kind of mindset that can make a difference. But we have a bunch of other people who are here learning their lessons too, who don't seem to think that it's worth giving it a shot to try this or that or the other thing. and they just think that people with these kind of highfalutin ideas are nutballs and that we need to continue going down the road we're going. And I'm just sitting here going, oh, okay. So actually we need to go back further. We need to go way back. Matter of fact, we need to go back before the automobile, before the horse and buggy, for that matter, when we enslaved the horses to do our bidding, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, how far back are we going to go? We need to understand that there is an evolutionary process in our societies and our civilizations, as well as in ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're all evolving just the way our cultures are evolving. The cosmos lives within us, as the Buddhists teach. So, yeah, I mean, that's how we can see it. Even this vision, this image that I had that inspired my book is about the light always winning, the love always winning. And that cosmos lives within each of us as well. The light and the love in us is always winning, even when we're not acting like we're there yet. It is taking us on the process of growth towards the light and the love.
Isn't it true, though, that if there is darkness is not an element of its own? It's because the light is
the lack of light
blocked.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's as easy as turning on a light in a dark room. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah. Or as the other saying goes, lighting one candle in the darkness.
Right.
And we can make that happen. SueFrederick, my guest. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story. We are talking with SueFrederick. SueFrederick.com is the website, and we encourage you to go there. And we also encourage you to pick up a copy of her book. And her book is entitled Through a Divine Lens. And there's the book, and you'll be seeing it throughout the program as we are wrapping things up here on Tell Me Your Story. I've already given the preliminaries earlier in the program, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right to those final three questions. And I actually remember back in 2007 when we first came up with the concept for this program, which was the title was derived from a song by Mary Black, an Irish singer, who we listened to incessantly on our travels throughout Ireland in 2002, 3, and then again in 2004. And the song, I thought, was the title of this program. Turns out it's called Flesh and Blood. And we came up with this title. And when I was thinking about the program, I'm going, I need to have something at the end, like something that I do every single program. And it came to me not only asking the questions, but also extending love too. And I went through that, and we'll have that in just a few moments. But the original questions were rather interesting, and I've considered the possibility of going back 15 years of programs and putting together, documenting in print, if you will, the answers to those questions that many of my guests have given. Maybe one day I will. But in the meantime, I will ask our guest for the answers to these new questions that we have, as we are fast approaching the celebration of our 15th year. And that's September 7th of this year, 2023. So the first of the three questions, who is Susan or SueFrederick?
A soul on a journey like everybody else, doing the best I can.
What is your life's purpose?
To help shift consciousness with words and ideas that I get from the highest divine realms.
And what was your best day?
Today.
Sue, I want to thank you so much for being with us here on the program and talking with us about the shared death experience. They can find more about that through your website, right?
Yes, SueFrederick.com.
And we encourage people to go there. We will be linked, as always, to your website, to all of our guests' websites. And I would say that less than 0.0001% of our guests don't have a website. It's amazing. Maybe one a year does not have, and for various reasons. But we're glad that people can find out more about the work that you're doing. And we thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, and here we go, folks. It gets a little longer each time someone passes on. Love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, I know you're happy, and so am I. And Doug, I miss you, my friend, and I'll see you sometime down the road.